Shenaz Patel from Mauritius has written many novels, plays, and short stories in both French and Mauritian Creole. Best known is her 2005 novel Le Silence des Chagos, which for American readers is about the military base in Diego, known as Diego Garcia, where all of our planes are often flying off to Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Tells the story of what life was like before the Americans came. As a working journalist, she writes about social and cultural issues, and much of her writing seeks to unearth the unsaid and the untold. Please join me in welcoming Shenaz.
Hello everybody, it's a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon. I recall some time back when I was at home in Mauritius and I came across, I don't remember exactly how, but I came across something telling about reading in Prarie Lights. And I was thinking, oh, that's so great having a reading in Prarie Lights, even I didn't even know where that was. So I can tell you how happy I am this afternoon to be with you here with all my friends from the IWP and with all you people who like to enjoy the emotions of literature. So thank you very much. I wasn't going to read from Le Silence des Chagos, but something happened this weekend. As Chris said, to put it very briefly, Les Chagos is an archipelago that was part of the territory of Mauritius. Mauritius was a British colony. When we asked for independence in 1968, the British agreed to give us independence, but they decided to keep that part of our territory for them. And the plan was to lease it to the Americans to put up one of the main American military bases, the base of Diego Garcia, from which all the bombardings on Iraq and Afghanistan have gone these last years. So Mauritius is still claiming its sovereignty over these islands, and the people that were living there, the Chagosians, are still fighting nearly 50 years afterwards to have their plight recognized and to have a right to go back. And this weekend, 2 days ago, the Prime Minister of Mauritius was at the 71st General Assembly of the United Nations in New York, and he took a very strong stand on that affair. So reading a little part of Le Silence des Chagos is a bit for me like an homage, a tribute today to the fight of these people, of these exiled people. Charlesia was starting to be fed up with all those Mauritians who aimed to hold her back. At the hospital, the doctor had been saying for a long time now that her husband was completely recovered and he could live. It was obvious that he was healed, and for that matter, she'd been sure that she could have healed him at home in Diego. A few days of Filao tea infusions to lower tension and fresh coconut milk to cleanse the system, and his symptoms would have disappeared. But the nurse over there was a scaremonger. He has to go to Mauritius. We can't care for him anymore here. He has to seek treatment in Mauritius. That's what they wouldn't stop saying to Charlesia. Even the administrator encouraged her to leave. Go, you have to go. He'll be better cared for in Mauritius, and it'll do you good anyway. You've worked hard. It's vacation season. Bring the kids, have a good time, stop worrying. She finally let them convince her, and they left on the next voyage of the Mauritius boat. They disembarked there at the end of that quay, which led to the dust-cluttered noise of Port Louis. More than a month had passed since. Her husband was fully recovered, and it was well past time to return. They'd been imposing for too long on these people with their 6 children. It wouldn't be soon till their welcome turned to vinegar. She could feel it. They had a funny way of living here, always in a rush, constantly required to stuff themselves inside the claustrophobic, harsh cities. The children were getting restless. They needed space, their space. This time, the people at the Rogers office would have to reply to her. She'd gone there twice already, asking when the next boat would depart for Chagos. She could see herself aboard, turning her back to the grey port surrounded by those eyesore-high mountains. Sea filling her lungs, a week's calm journey to the north, and then, one morning, in the slanted light of dawn, their rosary of islands, sprinkled over the water like a spray of gentle prayers, whispered, granted. Charlesia pulls a flower-embroidered handkerchief from her blouse, wipes off her forehead. She enters the office. A few ceiling fans struggle to turn, their blades creaking and wheezing under layers of dust and fossilized coal. Several men, shirt sleeves rolled up, are seated behind green formica desks, piled high with folders and dirty cups. Charlesia goes up to the person standing closest to the door. He raises his head, tosses her a brief glance. Well, look who's here. A sharp laugh lifts up through the room. Charlesia holds her ground. Mollet connaît quand bateau poilé. She's not asking them for sorcery. She simply wants to know when the next boat leaves for Chagos, her home. The fans creak a little louder. Mollet connaît. Go on, tell her. The voice comes from the back of the room. Between two piles of folders, another man looks at her, with something evasive in his eyes, but his voice is firm. She has to be told. An immense silence descends over Charlesia's head. It lands suddenly on her chest, which contracts, and she is powerless to control it. Another voice rises up beside her. Then tell her yourself. The man hesitates. He fidgets with his pen, twirling it between his thick fingers, his nails almost perfect squares. I'll ask the boss. The man goes away, then walks back to his table, sits down again. Well? Asks his colleague sitting closest to him. Well, he told me to tell her. Maybe you should take her outside. She looks like a handful, that one, he says, laughing. Charlesia feels like she's going to lose it. Are they talking about her? What is all this gossiping about? She walks up to the man. Vous avez quelque chose pour dire moi? He barely lifts his eyes to hers. Yes, he has something to tell her. Better get on with it. It's almost noon and he has to hurry if he doesn't want to get overtaken by the crowd at the shop where the stuffed breads await him. You won't have a return boat. He blurted out the sentence, closing his folder with a force that made the metal rings on its side clatter. Charlesia doesn't move. She was afraid for a moment that he had slammed the folder shut on his fingers. She already saw his blood-streaked flesh twitch frenetically, trying to escape the steel ring that the restless left hand couldn't manage to force open. The sound of the folder booms in her head. The clacking rings, the clamoring of the drawer. He said something to her, but she didn't understand what. She looks at him to repeat it to her, but he continues to shuffle through his belongings. The others gather around him. Charlesia doesn't move. She stares at the man, waiting for him to repeat his sentence. There will be no more returning ships. You'll have to stay here. Zil infern. He spoke with a dry voice, lowered his head, and arranged his last papers in a drawer that he shut carefully with a key. Charlesia hears the blades of the fan stirring the air, cutting it up, and sending his words back to her. Zil in closed. Zil in closed. She blinks. The man approaches her. Around them, the office is empty. He puts his hand firmly on her shoulder, makes her turn to the door. She's outside. He disappears. Over there, the sea calls to her. Against the current of human waves that lap towards the exit, step after step, she walks to the farthest point of the quay where she stands, motionless. From his sentry box, the attendant watches her, hypnotized by that silhouette, by the red scarf prominent against the turquoise black backdrop of a glittering sea. He watches this woman in front of the sea, who appears to be waiting. Waiting for what? A boat, an ever-absent boat tattooed on the retina of a lookout woman. She probes the blue span, infinitely blue. But as much as she tries, she can't seem to hold through the curtain. The sea remains obstinately empty. There's no boat. There's no more boat for her. That's what they have just told her. Yet another one of their stupid jokes to pass the time. No more boat, that doesn't mean anything. That sentence has no sense. They'd better shut up rather than spurt out such insanities. Zil fermé, yeah, that's it, your island is closed. Heck, what do they think, this bunch of simpletons? That it's a restaurant or something like their shitty office of deadbeats? Something which, with opening and closing hours from 9 to 4 written up on the doors? If she threw herself in the water, would the too soon gone boat come back to rescue her? Bring her back home on the other side of the sea? Charlesia steps up to the edge of the quay. The greasy harbour waters flock heavily against the concrete parapet. Over there, the horizon is a sharp, bright line. The boat has already gone over it, without her. And she asks herself, wherefrom comes that wave that rolls suddenly through her whole body? I just wanted to thank Patricia Hartland. I don't know if she's here with us this afternoon. She's making a wonderful work of translating this text, and I'm so very grateful to her for the talent and the intensity she's putting in that work.